I'm just going to do a little bit of chatting while we wait for everyone to arrive. But welcome. It's nice to see you all. This is the first day of the Bristol Housing Festival Expo 2021, which is really exciting for us. And this, in fact, is our very first event of the Bristol Housing Festival this year. So we are delighted to have you here. I'm also delighted to have these wonderful panelists as well, who I will introduce properly shortly. But I'm just going to say welcome everybody in for a few more moments. We're just gonna wait a few more minutes to see who else is going to arrive, because I know that there have been a few more people that have registered. So, and now that we're all very comfortable with the webinars and the Zoom, we all do show up a little bit later now than we used to back in the day where we first started doing Zooms and webinars, where everyone would arrive bang on time, because that was the best way forward. So welcome those of you that are just arriving. Thank you so much for coming. We're looking forward to this event, which will start properly very, very shortly. For those of you that are not aware, the Bristol Housing Festival Expo this year is a mixture of online and in-person events. And we are mixing and matching our kind of virtual and in-person events over the course of the next 2 weeks. So if you haven't seen the full lineup of events, please do check out the website, and you'll notice that there are a few different things that you can sign up for. And if you can't get to any of them, but you are really keen to see them, a lot of them are going to be kept on YouTube, and you'll be able to watch the recordings again afterwards. So don't worry too much, because you will be able to see those afterwards. But do take a look at the lineup, take a look at the various events that you can come and join us for. We'd love to have you. But before, now that we've got most people in the room, I am going to kick us off. So thank you so much for joining us, and a very warm welcome to those that have joined the room just recently and haven't heard my intro so far. So my name is Jessie Wild, and I'm the Deputy Project Director for the Bristol Housing Festival, and it is wonderful this morning to kickstart the Bristol Housing Festival Expo with our webinar, Unlocking MMC to Drive Affordable Housing in the South West. So this webinar is to celebrate the end of an Innovate UK funded project, which was called Enabling Housing Innovation for Inclusive Growth, which technically finished last month, at the very end of last month. And we're really proud of what has been achieved over the course of the last 18 months. We started in April 2020 with a consortium of 14 partners coming together to deliver this demonstrator project as funded by Innovate UK. And there have been so many positive outcomes of this project. Now, there is so much to say and so little time, so I'm going to move us on and just say welcome, thank you panelists. We have a number of people that have made up the core team of the Innovate UK funded project. And we also have Sherry Rad from Innovate UK, from the Transforming Constructive Challenge team. We have Jacqueline Miller from Bristol City Council, Jez Sweetland, the director of the Bristol Housing Festival, and Phil Stott from YTKO. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves properly and give us a bit of a flavour of who they are, why they're here, and why this project why they've been involved in, or how they've been involved in this project as we go. But just to say that this is being recorded, it is being live streamed on YouTube. So do please bear that in mind as you're watching this, and do feel free to direct people there after the recording, which it will remain on YouTube indefinitely. So do feel free to pass the link on to colleagues that you think might be interested. There will be a chance after the panelists have spoken for a Q&A. So if you do have any questions as people are speaking, please do pop them in the Q&A box. You'll notice you've got a chat function and a Q&A function. So do make sure all your questions go into the Q&A so that I know where to look. I can find all the questions, I can direct them to the right people. If you have a question that is specifically for a specific person, do make sure you note that in your question, and then I can get it to the right person. If not, I'll just direct it to the panel or who I think is best to answer that question. All right, that's enough from me. So thank you so much, everybody. Sherry, I'm going to come to you first and ask you to introduce yourself, and then if you could hand over to Jez and Jacqueline, and then finally to Phil, and then we will come back together and do the Q&A. So Sherry, over to you.
Hello everyone, and thank you, Jessie. My name is Sherry Rad, and I'm the Innovation Lead for Transforming Construction Challenge. As part of this challenge, we have invested £170 million, matched by £250 million from industry, bringing together contractors, supply chain, innovators, government, client, and research community together. Our investment is rapidly overturning a system that wasn't working for anyone, in which the priority was always given to the cheapest solution. Instead, we are now working together to deliver a greater whole life value, if you like, to the society, rather than just working towards cheapness. Targets from this challenge from the outset were projects that were delivered 50% faster, whole life costs that were reduced by 33%, lifetime emissions slashed by half, and productivity raised by 15%. The vision has been realized, and the data demonstrates that all targets have been reached or passed. As the new approaches and technologies are more widely adopted, we expect even bigger gains to be made. For instance, what we are doing together in working at scale today, outputs forecast to be deployed on projects by 2027 are around £25 billion. And Transforming Construction Challenge has shown that the industry is quick to adopt innovation when conditions are right. The investments are based on 3 central challenges, which was the criteria for choosing this particular project or demonstrator as well. Moving to a manufacturing approach from suppliers right to the site, embracing digital technologies and data-driven processes, and shifting to selling outcomes, what a building does rather than what it is, and maximizing whole life value of assets. We need more of the same, but we need more public commitment to these 3 areas so that we need to scale adoption very quickly at scale. That means that in long term, MMC can be a large-scale solution for every tenor for social housing, home ownership, build to rent, or market sale. And that's, again, one of the reasons that we chose this particular demonstrator. The demonstrator basically aligned with the scope of our Transforming Construction competition. It demonstrated using real-world and social and community-led housing developments, innovation in complementary MMC-based housing supply chains, addressing challenges to delivering housing at scale that meets local and national targets. And that's where our funding went, and we're really pleased with the outcome of this project. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sherry. That's really, really helpful. Jez, can I hand over to you to introduce the project from the Bristol perspective?
Yeah, thank you. I was just slightly struggling to find my mute button. Apologies for that. Unmute. So, Sherry, thank you so much. And it would be remiss of us, obviously, not to just again thank the support from Innovate UK and the Transforming Construction Challenge, which we've been thrilled to be part of. I think the first thing to say about this project was it was a complex consortium, and Phil Stott is here from YTKO, who led that, and obviously pulling together 14 partners during COVID has not been without its challenges, but a huge shout out really to the whole team who have pulled together. And I think that we are all delighted to have got to this point of the process and to ensure that we now have momentum to build from. And to explain a little bit about, if I may, that the journey that took us into this project as a consortium, and then the sort of outcomes that we've set to achieve, but also I think the momentum that's built for further innovation to come. So the Bristol Housing Festival was partnering with the council back in 2018 and very much looking at how can you start to enable modern methods of construction, framing always the debate around this problem that we have about how do we increase that supply chain, but always looking at the sort of the triple lens that is our housing crisis, our climate emergency, and our skills shortage. So we've always recognised that MMC could be an incredibly powerful force for good into that space. And that was a very clear alignment from day one in terms of the partnership with Innovate on this project. But we also have recognised that, of course, modern methods can be agnostic. So one of the challenges, I suppose, that we've tried to bring to this space is how can local authorities really start to understand their power to help incubate values into that supply chain as it matures. So as we bring land forward, what are the values that are going to underpin that emerging supply chain that is manufactured housing? And so that really was the beginning of the conversation with the Housing Festival that started to align with the work of the council, looking at the urgency of how we increase, particularly the delivery of affordable housing into our city. And that was always the thrust for us in this, was that as we look to develop a manufacturing supply chain of housing in the UK, how can it really tackle social inequality? It can't just be about the technicality, it has to also be about those outcomes rooted into our climate, rooted into social equality. And so the partnership is broad. We have 9 MMC partners, and I'm going to list them all just very briefly to give you a feel of the spectrum. We specifically tried to ensure that we had a broad ecosystem from the large volumetric through to panelised, through to real SMEs in our local community, because we recognise we need that new supply chain to be broad and inclusive. So Booklook, No West Media Centre, Legal and General Modular, Modulus, Project Utopia, Snug, Tempo, Totally Modular and Z-Pods were the 9 individual demonstrator projects that we're trying to partner with and land in the UK to deliver about 420 homes, over 60% which will be affordable, and about £90 million worth of GDV into the city. But alongside that, there's also the kind of the technical support that goes along with that, obviously led by YTKO, support with Arcadis and their place intelligence tool, working very closely with BRE, who are bringing a lot of that data resilience and the reporting back into Innovate to look at how can we ensure that this is really hitting those data targets around the pace of delivery and the whole lifetime costing of this project, working very much hand in glove with Bristol City Council, the courage to lead on this in the sense of bringing a local authority full square into that R&D space. And of course, not to forget that we also were trying to then bring that consortium together to have a strong shared narrative. And the narrative that the project developed was around 3 themes, 3 specific outcomes that we think are important to look at in their totality. So the individual 9 demonstrator projects in Bristol were really saying, how can we ensure that some of the funding is going to those MMC suppliers to help them improve their efficiency of delivery, their understanding of how to land these sites, their sustainability and their pace of delivery. So they each had funding whereby which they could improve their productivity, they could improve their system confidence, they could improve their data ability to capture that data and really drive their standards and their efficiency forwards. So those are the 9 demonstrator projects. But one of I think that the unique things about this project was then working hand in glove with Bristol City Council, and it's great that we're joined by Jacqueline Miller, who will speak a bit about that. But we talked a lot about how can we use the aggregation of those 9 sites, those 9 different systems, those 9 different opportunities, working 9 different communities across Bristol to look at those barriers to enabling modern methods of construction. And actually, we think there's a huge opportunity in the fact that what we now know and what we thought was the case was that when we're looking at MMC, it's not a small system change. It's not a tweak to the way that we currently do things. It's a fundamentally different approach in terms of the sequencing of decision-making, the procurement processes, the cash flow, the capital process, the legal form. And within that, there's the innovation risk. How can you really start to understand about how to socialize, create that institutional confidence and experience to drive MMC forward at pace? So we referred to that second outcome as a sort of a council change model, and we'll be producing a report on those outcomes today, but it was the ability to aggregate those 9 sites, drive them through the system and really look at some of the challenges that MMC currently poses. And within that, to bring the narrative consistently back to this is not just about MMC per se, this is about how we help the city create an understanding about how MMC can help deliver quality, sustainable, affordable houses at pace. So aligning with the social value ambitions of the city, aligning with the climate challenges and the commitments of the city, we recognise that was going to be a key theme to creating that confidence and the ability to aggregate, replicate and do again and again. So we have the 9 demonstrator projects, we had the council change model, and crucially, we also recognised that there was a challenge in terms of how local authorities in particular can engage with and understand this MMC marketplace. The MMC marketplace is evolving at speed. And of course, the joy with the evolution of that marketplace is that what we hope to see is increased standards, efficiency, productivity, sustainability. But for the local authority, that can be a very difficult marketplace to understand and engage with. And so the third outcome was around an optioneering tool. How could a local authority have digital solutions that could help it understand that marketplace, understand which sites that it may have that it wants to bring forward, can engage into the MMC sector with an ability not to be overwhelmed effectively with 101 glossy brochures all promising that they can deliver everything at once. And an outcome there that we're thrilled to be launching through this expo is constructing modern methods, and Phil Stott will talk a bit more about that in due course. So I think just at this point, I think it's really important just to get a feel for the totality of that project. We've got the demonstrator, which is the life and blood of this. None of this was going to be real if we couldn't deliver real homes for real people in the city of Bristol. But how do we use that opportunity to create that think and do tank mentality where we're bringing these real problems to the council that had real courage to say, okay, if we're going to do this, we're not going to do it once. We're going to look at this 9 different ways. And that aggregation is going to give us the opportunity of going upstream and looking at the challenges around viability, looking at the challenges around procurement, looking around the process of that sequencing of decision making, and how can we capture that learning to create that further confidence and actually disseminate that to other councils around the country. And then crucially, into that procurement space, into that understanding the MMC sector, how can we create tools that give particularly local authorities and social housing providers more confidence about the knowledge and accessibility of the confidence to engage in that MMC market. So those are the 3 outcomes. And I'm just going to hand to Jacqueline Miller now to speak a little bit about, particularly about that council change model and some of the social value opportunities that develop within that. Jacqueline.
Thank you, Jazz. So the vision for us was to understand how, in adopting MMC, we could increase the scale and pace of the delivery of housing in the city. But in addition to that, we wanted quality, sustainable, beautiful homes. And at the time we submitted the bid to Innovate UK, we acknowledged that over time we have explored different strategy, delivery and funding models, but we haven't seen the impact and outcomes that we wanted and that we need to address the housing need in the city. So around about the same time that our colleagues at Innovate UK were looking at the programme and how they can fund a constructing programme, Bristol set our commitment and the challenge. Partly, Jess, that was demonstrated by working with you in the Housing Festival and inviting some of those MMC providers and their systems, and some were really still at concept and prototype. We brought them to the city through one of the early expos, and we also set some really challenging targets for ourselves, aimed at driving that much needed delivery. And I'm really pleased to be here today with Sherry so that we can extend our thanks to the Innovate UK team, because whilst we had that aspiration to deliver the 9 different MMC demonstrator schemes, what the funding did was enabled us to gather and maintain that momentum. And it really challenged us to do a lot of that work within the 18 months. So I'm saying thank you, but maybe thank you is not the right word, Sherry. But, you know, we've gotten there. And I recall, Jez, in the early days, us, you and I, and our good friend and colleague, Nigel, sort of huddled around a table, drafting this bid and really sort of challenging back to ourselves, asking if whomever at Innovate UK was reading and evaluating this bid, if they would get what we were on about, would they get what we were trying to articulate and what we were wanting to achieve? Because we were talking about things like added value, social value, community benefit in the context of well-established construction industry that have already got recognised financial, economic and some environmental metrics and indicators for measuring and monitoring performance. And, you know, at the moment, I think it's fair to say that construction and commissioning schemes and homes is driven by price, and price at the point of commissioning. So we were really sort of testing what was, you know, known and loved and familiar to a lot of our colleagues, but also to the sector. So in delivering the project, we wanted to go beyond the traditional measures and start to understand whole life costs, benefit, occupant experience, the impact on people, communities, the environment, and start to drive our wider corporate objectives. And that's when it became really quite powerful, actually, because we were talking about tackling economic disadvantage, fuel poverty, affordable housing, and thinking about minimising disruption, waste, what about net zero carbon? And then we kind of went beyond that again, and we're talking about, well, what about local skills and local jobs, and what about the local economy? So we viewed the MMC supply chain and the local authority within it as an ecosystem in its own right. And we started redefining value and viability and how we assess, measure and quantify those. So we didn't know at the outset, being research, development and innovation, if any homes would actually be complete in the 18 months of the project, let alone occupied within the life of the project. But we do, and you know, I'm going to be a bit shameful here, Jazz, but many of these schemes are nationally recognised and they've won several awards. And we've got a number of other schemes that aren't yet underway and delivered, planned. So, you know, that kind of gives us that real commitment to finishing off what we started here. We're incredibly proud of what the consortia have achieved under the project and the benefit that's been brought to our city. And we've seen some great partnerships and collaboration form along the way, and new and different ways of working emerge. We've unlocked some sites previously not deemed suitable for development, so the small, inaccessible sites that were already in use, and we've retained some of those uses like car parks. And we've, you know, adopted surplus land within the boundaries of existing residential properties, and introduced new homes in different ways to communities, creating new communities within communities. We described, when we submitted the bid, developing a change model. And, you know, we talked about that being a suite of documents, really. It was guidance, templates, it was lessons learned. But for us now, it's really just about the institutional confidence, knowledge, and maturity that we've got. And that gives us that ability and willingness and aspiration, actually, to try something new. So we're using new technology to help us understand, sift, and assess potential sites across the city, like the Arcadis Place Intelligence tool that I hope that will feature later on in the expo. We're using intelligence and data to determine potential performance and working with our colleagues at PRE. And to understand the market, I'm sorry, Phil, you'll talk about this in a minute, but we've got the CMM database, and working with our colleagues at SWPA in their development of the MMC dynamic purchasing systems, that will enable the public sector to commission some of these schemes, because whilst we have that ambition to trial the different MMC systems, the real issue for us, and what lots of other colleagues talk about, is how do we then go on and compliantly procure those systems, and what do the contracts need to look like to enable that to happen. So we've trialled and tested innovation and seen what I often refer to as innovation in practice. You know, it's evolved as we've learned, we've shaped policy and long-term strategy and plans as we've gone. And I think for us as a public sector body, that's been the really exciting bit. Jez, I might stop there and come back to you before I go down one of my rabbit holes. Sorry.
No, that's great, Jacqueline. I think we'll wrap it up there and sort of hand on to Phil. But I think what we're trying to do is just give you a flavour of by engaging with the Innovate UK projects, it's given us this opportunity to really pursue a lot of the kind of what I would call the holistic challenge and the complexity of how we really drive innovation. And again, recognizing that you can't just attack this from one side. And ultimately, one of the questions I think we're trying to pose for this project, and have done with real success, and again, credit to the council in this, is to say, look, if we're really going to understand how manufacturing housing can bring a new supply chain that is aligned to the values and the ambitions of local authorities and how they steward and use their public land, public bodies have got to get on board now, because as that supply chain matures around a set of values, around a business opportunity, if the public body sits back and just waits to see how that supply chain is going to mature, we may miss that opportunity. So there's a really significant moment, in my view, and over the next 3 or 4 years, around how we aggregate that shared vision, that shared commitment, and support this new supply chain to really look at those 3 combined challenges of the housing crisis, the climate challenge, and our skills challenge that we face as a nation. Phil, on that, I'll hand to you.
Thanks, Jez. Thanks, Jacqueline, and thanks, Sherry. So yes, to introduce myself, I'm Phil Stott, Head of Construction and Sustainability at YTKO, and the unfortunate person who had to get 14 claims in every quarter on time to Innovate UK. I would say this project has been an absolute eye-opener. I wanted to really emphasize something that Jacqueline touched on and Jez mentioned as well. This is not one out of the bag. This is a different type of Innovate UK project. I was really encouraged that this session today is called Unlocking MMC to Drive Affordable Housing at Pace. And I mean, we've talked a lot about a project, but this project is the microcosm of that issue. What was really interesting is when we started with transforming construction, the challenge, the Innovate UK bid, it became very clear that actually what we were facing, the challenges, or what maybe what the bid was expecting, and what a lot of the other projects that have been funded through this call have done, is they've really embraced and addressed the idea of, we're on the supply side, how can we make our system better? How can we make our system cheaper? How can we make our system quicker? How can we make our system greener? And that's really, really important. But what we did is we were sort of the odd one, and we went, we're going to approach this by not just saying, how do we make these systems better? And we've got 9 of them in the project, so that's lovely. But how can we actually change the pace? How can we improve the cost? How can we change that culture? And to be honest, in the private sector, you can use MMC, you can use traditional build construction. Both are entirely fine, both make complete sense. And it will, at the end of the day, come down to mainly a cost, an ROI, a return on investment. For the public sector, it sort of is maybe a slightly more, it shouldn't all be about cost, it should be about the common good. And that piece, for me, was where we've sort of done a lot of work to unblock and speed up that chain. And Bristol, by the way, been very open, honest, transparent, and brave in being part of this project, basically being a leading part of this project. And what came out of them, who are light years ahead of other local authorities as well, we should just say, what came out of the work we did with Bristol is they said, look, if you wanted to reduce this cost and the speed of MMC by 50%, then you really need to get the council to work as a smooth oiled engine. So our project was odd, because I imagine when we went in a cold January morning to London in St James's Park, and we went and presented the project to the Innovate board, I imagine they'd had a lot of quite technical, highly detailed system redesign, system deployment presentations. And we came in and we started talking about local authorities. And that was a very change of gear and change of pace. But, you know, credit to Innovate UK, they backed us. And going forward, I think what we've achieved in this project is huge. It really does tackle the point of this session, unlocking affordable housing at pace. So for me, if you look at low carbon, for example, the innovation in all of the 9 partners has pretty much included some element of reducing their carbon footprint, either through embedding and embracing, you know, air source heat pumps and renewable technologies, to looking at the fabric and the energy efficiency side of things and improving their U values. As a bit of a geek on energy efficiency and fabric first, I was very encouraged to see everyone reporting on their U values and their EPC ratings in the final project summary document. In addition to that, if you then look at the innovation side of things, how they can improve the widgets, how they can make the pipeline run quicker and smoother and reduce those costs. Again, fantastic findings. I think we were all expecting that we weren't going to win the is traditional cheaper or more expensive than MMC argument. The reality is for many years, traditional build housing, if you take it at just the build cost versus the MMC build cost, it is cheaper. Now, what's been fantastic is, as a result of this project, we've actually said, yeah, it might be slightly cheaper, but it's not that cheaper. And actually, going forward, if you take value into the idea of maintenance in terms of the improvements in energy bills, if you look at how MMC building eliminates basically the performance gap and improves quality on site. With traditional construction, you rebuild pretty much 20% of everything you build. In MMC, you don't. If you actually start to look at value properly, then actually MMC is the sensible, thrifty choice, which you never used to be able to say about MMC. And that's what's really useful about this project, is we're constantly debunking myths. We're making sure that MMC is compared properly, robustly with traditional build. And when you get into a local authority landscape, you then need to have the data and the creds to back that up. So we developed this toolkit, Constructing Modern Methods. And really that was just 2 years of going around and asking everyone for their data, which when you take that to commercial organizations, they're not often very keen to give you. But we begged, we borrowed, we stole, we managed to get that data together. And what that shows is a cross-cut of the sector. That's all we're trying to do. And what we did is built a very nice fancy tool that allows people who work in local authorities, housing associations, public bodies, to be able to utilize that data and understand if a site is best fit for a panelized or volumetric system. Is it a case that actually it might cost huge quantities if you want a passive house standard, it goes on stilts and actually it costs, you know, near zero to run. Is that out of your budget? It brings together key data on literally what the environmental performance, what the social value of these type of systems can offer you. So it takes that whole conversation out of just pounds per square metre, and it provides it into a much wider context, a much broader context, a much more holistic concept of value. And then it just allows you to compare the market. You literally can see what different providers can offer you. And then we don't stop there, because what we realize is that local authority might love to know the market, might be able to do a risk assessment, might be able to understand what the market can offer. But then if they can't procure it, they can't do anything. And absolutely, we wanted to make procurement robust, legal, absolutely transparent. And by doing that, we partnered with the South West Procurement Alliance so that we can now offer a DPS, a dynamic purchasing system, to procure that. So any local authorities out there, there's a great tool here that allows you to just understand the MMC market a little better. One quick thing I wanted to add was I was at an event in Birmingham last week, and it was really clear that industry is constantly improving off its own bottom line, to be honest, off the R&D. It is investing to make its buildings better, to make them cheaper, to make them quicker, to make them higher quality. It's doing all of that. The thing is with the exception of Bristol, I don't know many local authorities who are doing the same. I don't think local authorities are investigating the market. And as a result of that, I think there's going to be a complete disconnect at some point. What we're trying to do in this project is get clients, in terms of local authorities and housing associations and public bodies, to be able to understand the market better. And I think the market is doing great stuff on its own. And in a way, I just want the local authorities and their potential clients to recognize that, understand it, not fear it, and then take advantage of it. So I'll stop there because I know I'm going to get shouted at by Jessie in a minute. But thank you. And I think we're going to get some good questions, hopefully.
Thank you so much, everybody. And just a reminder, if you do have any questions, and for specific panelists as well, please do drop them in the Q&A. But I actually have some that have come through ahead of time, so I'm going to start with those. But if you do have any questions, there's a Q&A box in the panel at the bottom of your screen, so you should be able to add any in there. Phil, just off the back of what you were saying, I wanted to come to you first, specifically to just ask if we have MMC providers, modern methods of construction, modular providers, for example, on the call, and they wanted to get involved with CMM, how would they go about doing that?
Oh, absolutely, yes. What we're looking for at the moment, and what we're finding actually, is that a lot of people, where it was a bit of a grind initially, a lot of people are now keen to provide us with their data, to be in that, I call it the shop window. So we have a website, which I'll drop the link into in the chat, because I can't do two things at once, speak and put things in the chat, unfortunately. But once I've shut up, I'll pop the link in there. Please do give us your information. It's fairly simple. It's not a long process. And what's more is it gives you that opportunity to just be in the shop window. I would also say for SMEs and sole traders out there who are always put off with procurements, for people who've just come up with an MMC system and then go, but I haven't actually got 2 years of accounts and trading history, give us your data. A lot of the schemes that we're seeing coming forward are using small sort of 1-2 housing sites, small redeployed garden sites. These sites are absolutely, I mean, they won't require a full procurement in terms of DPS, but they will require a sort of an opportunity to look at those smaller providers. So please do absolutely put your details in there. We're really keen to get that data, as much data as we can, because to be honest, at the very least, it gives everyone a realistic view of what's in the MMC market at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Phil. That's really, really helpful. Okay, so I want to ask first, really off the back of this project and so many things that have happened and so many positive outcomes that we've seen, what comes next? So as you look forward, as you look ahead, as you look at the roadmap coming out of this project, how do you ensure that this doesn't become something that just has been done, completed, 18 months, job done, box ticked? What does it look like to move forward? And specifically as well, Jez, you spoke about kind of the 3 different challenges, 3 different crises that we face. How does this going forward speak into those 3 different things? So I'm going to direct this firstly to Sherry, just to ask you from the Innovate UK perspective, what, as you look forward, how does this help your kind of national agenda really going forward?
As I mentioned before, this is one of our biggest flagship projects, and the size of the grant was quite sizable as well, and the achievements are absolutely huge, as mentioned by our challenge director Sam Stacey in his gratitude towards you guys that we do absolutely need to follow this up. We will have measures in place, and any of the MMCs providers and SMEs on the project that need further help from us with regards to private or public investment can contact us, and we do have private finance in place for successful SMEs in place that I can put you in touch with. So we have a department that's actually looking into exploitation, and so it's not just the fund and forget type of scenario from us anymore. And we do follow this up and handheld you into the society and introduce you to make sure that we can commercialize the success of projects like this. So there are plenty of opportunities within Innovate UK. By all means, contact us and we'll put you through those links.
Brilliant, really helpful. And Jez, can I come to you specifically around, how you see this developing, particularly in the context of those 3 crises and challenges that you mentioned?
Yes, and I think the first thing to recognise is that this was an 18-month sprint, and actually, I think probably one of the advantages is that we haven't got all the homes built. So, we've got of the 9 schemes, the only one that's complete, or there's 2 that are complete. One is ZPOS, which is the Hope Rise project, which has 11 homes, and then Snug, which was a 1 home delivered by an SME. But of the larger projects, Booklook on the Brook are now on site with their 173 homes. We've got LNG Modular are now on site in Bonington Walk, delivering about another 180 homes there. And then there's another 3 or 4 schemes coming forward where we're into planning. And I think the real opportunity is actually those projects are still coming through the council, and they're still being worked on, and they're still being understood. And that's really important. One example in terms of the legacy, I think, of this is this challenge around the development appraisal models that we use. So I see a question as well around what's the sort of sites that we're using. So a good example there is there's a scheme we're looking at, which is an old garage site in Bristol to bring about 8 social homes forward in partnership with Project Utopia and BDP. Now that scheme is a great example where you're unlocking existing brownfield land, which is complex, access issues, rights of way, rights of light, all of that real complexity. But the win is that we can try and understand how we can use that land to really build highly energy efficient, really good quality social homes. Now that doesn't currently work within that existing kind of development appraisal mindset, which is let's repay that capital within 30 years. And if we can't do that, we can't move. So bringing that lifetime cost in, looking at the other additional social value benefits, looking at the savings to the council in terms of revenue, not just capital. And we're starting to do quite an exciting piece of work, again, working with Jacqueline, the council around, in partnership with the Construction Innovation Hub, around their values toolkit, which the council is going through at the moment, to say, well, look, we've really got to look at how we drive policy into delivery, and therefore through delivery, how we get the right outcomes for the city, which is about building the right houses that the city actually needs. And some of that is about this brownfield, greenfield debate, because the reality is brownfield is more expensive. So again, MMC and this project is providing us an opportunity to really look at some of the devil in the detail of that, and to say, well, how can it be that we are asking in terms of increased materials costs, increased labour costs, increased land inflation, higher regulations, an appetite for green and sustainable infrastructure and decarbonised energy, all of that cost at the moment is going to increase until we can understand the real value that we're unlocking. So moving from a cost capital basis into a value proposition. And I think that's the work, again, that local authorities can really do, because of course they have land to bring to play. I think the final thing I'll say simply is a plug. We're going to do a little webinar on this as well, which is obviously, the constructing modern methods is a key outcome of enabling this. The council itself is committed to do more MMC and exploring how it can bring real pace into its delivery pipeline over the next 5 years. So we've got that context, and also how we share the narrative. So we're involved now with the Smart Cities Climate Challenge, which has been launched by Nesta. It's going to be officially launched on the 3rd of November in Dubai at the International Expo. And again, credit to Bristol City Council saying, well, how can we take what we've learned on this project and bring it forward to look at land in the city where we're really now pushing on that sort of development appraisal challenge and building MMC that is going to really tackle that sustainability crisis. But it can't be about the widget. It can't just be about the technological solution. It has to be about system change that knows how to pay for, invest in, and release that technology. So we're at the beginning of the journey, but what we have is story, we have evidence, we have data, We have an understanding, creating institutional confidence with the council. So now we drive on that momentum for the next stage. So chapter 1 is done. We're into chapter 2. Phil.
Brilliant. Phil, I'm going to come to you in a second, but if you could just pause for just one moment. I want to just bring that back, Jez, you speaking about the council. Jacqueline, I just want to come to you first before we come to you, Phil, and I just want to kind of, from your perspective as from Bristol City Council, is there anything you wanted to add about the kind of sites that you're looking at and how the sites were tricky or how they were unlocked and the kind of constraints that you encountered? And also there's a question in the chat about what advice we would give to local authorities who want to embrace the MMC journey, that want to kind of take some advice from Bristol City Council on kind of where to start. So I just wondered if you could speak to what Jez has said and some of those questions from the council's perspective.
Thanks, Jessie. I mean, I see our role now as being the champions of MMC, and that to me is about being accessible for other organisations, whether it's public sector bodies, registered providers, community-led housing organisations, or providers themselves, MMC providers themselves, to get in touch with us. Let us know that you're out there. As Phil said, we need the data, we need the visibility of what providers are out there and what system they've got. Because what we're now looking at, which is where I come back to that place intelligence bit, is what land we've got. And you know, when you're under pressure, you kind of revert to what you know, don't you? And we're looking traditionally at larger schemes, you know, and what we don't have in Bristol anymore is large expanses of land. So that's pushed us into properly and having a detailed look at some of the smaller sites we've got. So we've got sort of odd spaces that are kind of between one residential plot and a bit of commercial land, and you know, there isn't any access road to it, as Jez was sort of mentioning earlier. We've got even things, you know, like contaminated land that actually is so expensive to decontaminate. Traditional approaches just won't work. And then we've been talking about things like air rights. So the ZPod schemes that you've talked about is actually above an existing car park, and we've retained that car park. So the community, and it's actually on a large park site in Bristol, actually. So what that's meant is the visitors to the site haven't lost their ability to drive and park if that's what they want to do. So, you know, I mean, we talk about austerity and sort of not having any money, but, and I know it sounds awful to say, but that makes us look at things differently and think differently and challenge some of those real standardized and well-established processes. You know, we churn, don't we, like a big machine, a local authority. So when we want to develop a new scheme and commission new houses, we tend to go out to tender. That's our knee-jerk reaction because that's the way we've always done things. And I think, you know, we're now really open to doing things differently. So like Phil was saying, you know, even if we're talking about a smaller provider, and as I mentioned before, some of these schemes that we've seen developed or that will be developed, they were at prototype, you know, or even concept. So this is the kind of the journey we've been on. But what we can do is look at schemes in isolation. So Jez talked about one of the completed schemes is a home. It's a single home that's in what was originally the back garden of another residential property. Before, we wouldn't have even contemplated that, you know, and now we're sort of saying we've got lots of land in the city. And sometimes that is the optimal solution. So Jessie, I think before I hand over to Phil, because I know he wants to jump in, what I'd just like to say is we're not saying and trying to demonstrate it's MMC or nothing. You know, what I know in Bristol is we've got diverse housing needs, we've got diverse land, and there are so many ways that we can go about building, whether it's one home for one person, you know, so some of those kind of residential plots, we're looking at maybe older adults that might live with relatives. That's ideal, that solution, and it tackles so many issues. It enables people to stay in their community near their support network. I can't quantify that, you know, and I'm kind of social value is my sort of area of expertise, but what I can tell you is it's the right thing to do and it has an impact. And I'm really excited, you know, by our sort of current administration, because we're now looking at, if we've got a set budget, do we do as much as we can, as quick as we can, or do we do high quality, sustainable, long-term, affordable. And that's the really exciting conversation for us. And it won't happen overnight. And we will still do those kind of traditional approaches where it's right to do. But we are releasing land to the types of homes for the purposes targeted sometimes. So one of our schemes was specifically developed in partnership with a supported housing provider, specifically during COVID, to enable some people that were in temporary emergency housing to come out of that housing into their own home. And this is some of the really powerful, exciting conversation that we're pulling people together from social care and providers, and recognising that the local authority can't do it in isolation. You know, so we're going out there and working with the organisations that are the expert at delivering some of this. Thank you, Jessie.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Phil, thanks for your patience. I'm going to come back to you, and please do jump in.
No, it was just simply to add that I've seen a lot of the questions in the chat are around sort of local authorities and getting them to sort of do the same. And there's a lot of, I mean, it's something that's really coming to mind recently as we sort of have gone out to more and more events and done what we would call the dissemination of the project. It's just becoming apparent that there is so much distance between the industry and the client at the moment. I mean, there's local authorities who I've spoken to who wouldn't even consider MMC, or only just starting to talk about low carbon housing. So we do have some good policy levers coming down the track, which is the pre-manufactured value, and Jez has mentioned several times that he thinks that that's potentially a way of getting around that. I would also say as well, and this is only a personal view, but I feel that as MMC starts to develop as a market, it's very important that there's opportunities for all different types. If you speak to any framework offerer or any DPS offerer, they would tend to say the vast majority of the sites in the contracts they're actually letting are for panelized systems rather than volumetric. Then on the other side of things, you've got sort of what they call the pattern book approach and the full volumetric approach, where a lot of local authorities are coming together, for example, and playing the scale game, where they've then got sizable sites available to allow the volumetric machines to churn the wheels and produce the volume of homes that they need to get the economies of scale in place. I think there's absolutely space for both models to exist, but I do think that sometimes local authorities are a little scared off by MMC and everything it means. Oh, do I have to build a big factory? Oh, do I have to find somewhere for 1,000 homes to live? And actually, I think if we can start to just say that it doesn't have to be like that, the market can provide you with one home in a back garden. And what's more, if we can tackle those barriers, because it's quite surprising sometimes that we have people from local authorities come to sites and they see and they go, well, these have appeared in a matter of weeks. How has this happened? And that's still a surprise, because for 25, 30 years, we've built in the same way, using the same procurement processes, using the same planning processes, and it's resulted in traditional build being built. And I still think there's this education piece that needs to happen, because we are all basically in a bit of an echo chamber of, yes, we get MMC and we quite like it. And I think there is a huge number of people out there who don't get it, and they don't like it, and they don't understand it. And all they see is legislative process and barriers and culture change problems. So the work that I've done with CMM is great and exciting, but also the work that they did with the council change model, and they took those lessons learned, and obviously the work that the Bristol Housing Festival does for 11 months of the year when you're not putting on the housing festival, that work going forward is absolutely critical to changing the culture. It's not all about volumetric. There is an absolute space for innovative new pilots, projects, small projects, and SMEs and micro businesses to thrive in MMC. But we need to educate the client. We need to go out there, and what Sherry mentioned in terms of having the legacy of this project is absolutely critical. And fortunately, it's something that I don't think anyone around this table here today is hanging up and not going to say anything for the next year. But it is something that everyone needs to start to promote, because that is, for me, the fundamental thing that will unlock pace of affordable housing is that education piece of the client.
And just sticking with you, Phil, just for a moment, there's a question in the chat about in bringing partners together, did the team find preparedness to share learning, and how can this be sustained beyond the project? And just as you answer that question, specifically looking at, we're very aware of the kind of skills crisis that we're facing as a construction industry, and I know that you have a particular passion to start to kind of think about addressing that, and I know we're going to be working together again on an upcoming project here. So could you speak to that question, but specifically as well looking forward around that area?
You're being brilliant, Jessie. It reminded me to mention things I've clearly forgotten I should be mentioning. So thank you for that. The project that we did actually entirely span out of the Innovate UK programme. Now, this specific pot of funding from Innovate UK, and Innovate UK have done tons of good stuff on skills, but this specific pot of funding actually didn't allow training or skills within its scope. Now, everyone knows construction has an absolute skills crisis down in the southwest, which includes Bristol. We need 32,000 new workers in the next 4 years. We've got the highest predicted growth in construction sector of anywhere in the UK, but we have potentially some of the largest skill gaps as a result of that. Now, with MMC, it's fantastic. Actually, the whole skills sort of conversation has gone away from trades and technical, and is talking much more about manufacture and understanding processes and pipelines and consistency of production and all those sort of manufacturing skills that are required. And what we found was that there was a big old sort of disconnect between what we would call local trades and local labour and the local trade economy, and the opportunity for them to work in MMC. And in fact, even some of the smaller MMC providers said the thing that we always do badly on social value is getting those apprenticeships, getting those local jobs, getting all that sort of local employment stuff, which unfortunately is one of the areas which scores very well on social value. So we said, well, let's see if we can tackle that. And through this project, we've had great collaboration. Again, I was hugely skeptical. I thought everyone would turn up and say nothing in any of the meetings, but we've had 9 partners who were willing to share sort of the successes and some of the failures. And what became really apparent is that actually there is a role for local construction trades on site. So working with the Offsite Alliance and Moby with Mark Southgate, and obviously yourselves at the Bristol Housing Festival and YTKO, we're launching a project over the next 18 months, which will specifically look at trying to find how MMC systems, whether they're big, large, volumetric panelized, can work with a local supply chain of traditional construction trades and upskill them. Because I don't want to see, 50% of houses built using MMC over the next 5 years, which then means we don't have any jobs for the local builders. I want to find a way that we can have all the benefits of MMC and also create a really robust pipeline of supply chain within the local construction envelope. So for me, that project is potentially the thing that I've been beating the drum on for so many years. About 5-6 years ago, I was talking to Jacqueline around the table in Bristol City Council about this idea. And I'm really pleased that we finally, with some support from the Workforce for the Future project, been able to bring that to fruition. So over the next 18 months, we'll be tackling the skills and continuing to obviously spread the good word about the great work that Bristol City Council have done with the Bristol Housing Festival.
Thanks so much, Phil. That's brilliant. Jacqueline, I'm going to come to you and bring you a question from the Q&A, and do feel free to jump in if there's anyone else that has an opinion on this. But Jacqueline, to start with, when we were looking at the demonstrator projects, what has the process been like with respect to gaining planning permission for these projects? So is there anything that you would ask of planners working in local authorities who are processing and assessing these planning applications or writing planning policies very specifically? I think partly this question it speaks to another one which we've had before the webinar started, around what are the kind of barriers that you might have faced as well as you've been looking at the kind of pilot projects and the demonstrator projects, and not just in planning but elsewhere within the council. Are there key things that you would highlight and key pleas you would make to policymakers as you look forward?
I think I'll be diplomatic and say a couple of things. Through the development of the change model that Jazz outlined, we've developed a number of recommendations for Bristol City Council internally, but also some that can be shared just to let other local authorities know of the types of things we've explored when we've encountered some of the issues we have, and how we've identified potential solutions to remedying those challenges. So those documents are out there, but I think as part of our commitment to the grant-funded project, we will very much look to replicate what we've achieved in Bristol ourselves, but also share that knowledge and learning and confidence with other bodies. So I put a couple of notes in some of the chats just to say, feel free to share our contact details. You can come back through the Housing Festival. I can see Jess cringing as I say that. But, make contact. Let us have a conversation. It's often nuanced issues with specific sites, Jessie. It's rarely kind of, one provision in a planning policy will solve all the problems. I'd share with you that the key for us, and it has been a journey and it has been frustrating for some of our partners in navigating those complex local authority processes that are really lengthy. And actually, often we've got very strict criteria. But the key has been in the communication, in the community consultation, and the engagement and conversation early on. So, we did have a couple of schemes and the initial planning application was rejected outright. But, there is then an opportunity to revisit that application. I'm not saying challenge your appeal, but there is opportunity to resubmit that application with further justification and explanation. And what I'll share with you is that in Bristol, we've seen what can be achieved when we are open to that conversation. So one of the issues we had was around space standards, and there was no space standard for a 2-storey, 1-bed property. So where does that leave you? So we weren't not complying with those space standards. A standard doesn't exist. So it's that conversation of, we're not trying to break the rules, we're just saying the rule isn't there. So if the rule isn't there and actually you're achieving more space by a 1-bed, 2-storey, then surely that's a beneficial thing. So, it's small wins really like that have spurred us on. Jazz, I can see you've unmuted. Do jump in, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on that, Jacqueline, if I might, around the sort of one of the themes I think that came up in the questions was around this challenge of how would you encourage other councils to start on that journey, and of course planning is a key part of that journey. So I think a couple of reflections on that. I think one is that the council recognised quite early doors that to deliver a project of this, you've got to work across the council. So is it the procurement, the legal, the planning? You've got to bring people around a shared understanding of the problem, a shared sense of the purpose of what you're trying to achieve. So the council within BCC actually set up a Bristol Housing Festival working group, which is really our one-stop shop. And that was an ability to look at those problems, but with a commitment politically to say we need to understand how to engage in this and deliver it. So how does a council start on the journey? I think one of the things I've heard recently is that the last thing MMC needs is more pilots. And to one level, I agree with that. I think there's also a misnomer in that, though, which is for any council, its first sort of real engagement with modern methods of construction is an element of it will be a pilot for that council. So to some extent, what we don't need are more pilots that sit in a silo without that real understanding that this is a political commitment to understand how to engage in MMC and drive further delivery through that manufactured supply chain. So if it's a pilot for a pilot's sake, you will end up with an experience that is, it's more difficult, it's more complicated, it was really frustrating, the planners didn't get it, there were procurement complications, and it creates its own solution, which is we won't do that again. If, on the other hand, the mindset of the pilot is this is our ability to build and stand on the shoulders of people who've done it before, to learn as much as we can, to know this time it's going to be difficult, but we're committed to it. So therefore, you bring that one-stop shop approach, recognizing there's an innovation cost. That's a very different pilot. So I think for me, the challenge would be how within a public sector context can you build that political ambition along with that delivery ambition, recognizing that MMC is an opportunity to really aggregate and drive pace and quality of delivery. Now, that is not straightforward, I recognise, but I think that would be my challenge back to other local authorities is, and we're doing the same. I mean, even in now, within Bristol, there is a conversation and we're saying, look, if we're really going to drive that supply chain, we need to aggregate demand, not just in Bristol, but across the whole of the West of England Combined Authority. What would a regional strategy look like where you're kind of creating a narrative around a regional centre of excellence approach to even further supercharge that new supply chain around that value proposition? So again, that's not a pilot for a pilot's sake. It's aligning the political levers, the funding that Homes England are starting to put into the RP sector, the support from national government, et cetera, to say we've got to work across that political and delivery piece. And for planners, I'll be honest, it's difficult right now because they're having to learn. But if they know why they're learning, And again, credit to the planning team at the council. A couple of these schemes are very difficult, learning the limitations of volumetric, but learning the benefits of volumetric and how we assess that is a critical piece of that journey.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And we've got a question in the chat that specifically, can you talk a little more about the range of MMC products you're looking at, the scale and the types of homes, for example, which I think you've touched on there, Jez. But Jacqueline and Jez, is there anything you wanted to kind of go into a little more on that specific question, sort of scale and different types of MMC homes? And then Sherry, I might come to you and ask that same question of you, but from what you're seeing on a more national perspective, what are the MMC projects that are going on that Innovate UK are involved with, and the scale and the type of homes? But Jez and Jacqueline first.
I think I'd start, Jessie, by saying, we need to get away from numbers and boxes to be ticked and think about what is the outcome we're trying to achieve. And I think if I sort of think back 5 years ago or so, when we were first sort of talking about what is this MMC, how can we utilise it? We get very stuck as procurement professionals on specifying and over specifying. And if we're not, and myself included, technical expert enough to specify something different and innovative, then we won't do it. We'll just revert to what we do know about, which is this number of bricks and this type of roof. And, so I think for us, we've been on a journey, and what we've learned is it's the right outcome and the right system for the right site. That's all that really matters. And there are different ways of commissioning those different systems. So like I said, we've got some sites, and one of our partners is working across a number of individual sites. And that's quite different. Usually when we talk about a scheme, all the homes are on the same plot of land. Whereas, our colleagues at Northwest Media Centre are looking at a number of different homes across a different set of sites in the city. Bigger than that, we're looking at a pipeline of a number of different sites, where normally a pipeline is site 1, site 2, site 3, not X number of units across a number of different locations. So I think the key for me is right back to, outcomes-based commissioning. And that includes the right route to market. So I know one of the questions is talking about SMEs and, your financial standing, and it's really a thing for Phil. But what I would say is, if commissioners can't see you, they can't commission you. And we're very much talking about moving away from very rigid, standardized processes for commissioning systems and utilizing the flexibility within the legislation that exists to enable us to commission the right home for the right person in that particular community on that site. Jez, shall I come to you? I'm sure you want to add to that.
I think just to picking up on a couple of those questions in the chat. So for me, I think the bit that Jacqueline's touched on is that we're trying to support a proper marketplace, a proper ecosystem. So I think the danger that I would foresee is that we end up with 2 or 3 major players in the UK who effectively could then replicate the traditional house building model. And that's not to say that's wrong, but I think there's a missed opportunity there. I think that the power of MMC and what we'd love to see and love to incubate is a much broader supply chain where there is collaboration around that upscaling the supply chain so we can drive cost and quality and standardization where it's valuable. But for the consumer and for the marketplace, we have a broad range of players. And for me, that has to also understand how we support those SMEs, as well as the full volumetric and the massive national, international players. But we need to do that. And that's tricky. So the community-led housing, Northwest Media Centre, I think was for us a really important piece of that, as was Snug, the one house. Now, that's the first house they've built. But we believe that now is their proof that they can start to think about how they scale that. And already they've been commissioned for more. And, it's really exciting seeing some of these smaller innovators giving space in this marketplace. The community-led housing, there's a whole challenge around how the council is doing that. And of course, what this project has done is allowed us to look at, frankly, it's not just about how the housing is built, it's how that land is disposed of and how we tackle best value and that whole strategy. So the council's doing a lot of work on that. And now we've brought this MMC space into there. So if you look at these 9 sites, what we've got is a mix of from 1 or 2 homes through to sort of 9 and 30 homes using panelized and some complex, right through to scheme, full volumetric at 200. And I think that they each raise different and difficult questions at different points of the process, but that was the point. Therefore, as we produce these reports over the next week or so, what we hope is that there's somewhere that there's a piece of story in there that's really important. And the final thing is to say is this: we talk a lot about housing. When we talk to the public, we really need to talk about people. We need to create a narrative around the reason we're doing this isn't just to build more homes. The reason we're doing this is that there's a commitment around how do we build homes that improve the mental and physical well-being of our population and the sustainability of the planet. Now, that's outcome-led commissioning. That completely changes the narrative. It completely changes the engagement with planning, and it starts to rebuild trust with communities where we need to build. And I bring that back as a challenge to all of us in the built environment. We need to understand how we connect back into people, because ultimately that is how people experience a home. They experience it in a home with their family, in a community. It's about people. We're not always very good at bridging those two elements from the technical into our lived experience. So there's a challenge to us all there, I hope.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jez. And Sherry, just briefly, I'd like to come to you and ask the same question from a kind of a broader perspective.
Sorry, my internet is really bad. Could you repeat your question, please?
Yes, of course. The question was around the variety and types of MMC and the scale that you're seeing of it being rolled out across the nation.
We have, as part of this transforming construction challenge, we have had a variety of amazing projects coming through. Some of them we managed to fund. Unfortunately, quite a lot of them we didn't manage to fund, but we have kept in touch. And there's some amazing innovation that's going on in this market, in MMC market, and it is for sure, as you have proven in this project, the way forward. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to connect all these new technologies and innovations through to our various, we have Innovate Edge within Innovate UK to support you further. We have I3P, which I myself work with, and they have an ecosystem that would support you further. So any of these amazing technologies that has come through various findings through your MMC findings and the KPIs that BRE are so kindly are putting together, all of them can be captured and worked with through, for example, our SME ecosystem within I3P. So I have, I think, spoken to quite a few of you guys throughout the life of the project as well, to keep in touch, not to just go and, try and be individuals within the market, to keep in touch with us, to provide these findings and data that you are collecting. And we can help you, put you in touch with these various initiatives that we do have going on, so that we can push this further, because the whole aim of this challenge is to do these case studies, or case stories as we like to call them, and prove that, it can be done. And with this particular project, it has more than achieved that. So we would like to push that further. And again, the stories catalogue that we write is again another example that we are trying to tell the wider public about the successes, shout about these and say, yes, MMC is all well and good in literature, but here's a proof, here's living proof that it has worked and it has actually achieved all the challenges that we wanted in reduction, productivity achievements, reduction of, achieving net zero, et cetera, So please carry on your good work and keep in touch with us. And we do manage to put you into commercialize your success, if you like.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm aware of time. Unfortunately, we are running short of it. We're due to finish at 1:15. And I just want to say, before we move on, we're going to end with a video. We obviously, being a consortium of 14 partners, it was going to be very tricky to have everybody on the panel. But we do want to show you a little bit of some of the other partners that were involved. And we have a short video that will end this whole webinar, just a 5 minutes kind of introduction from various different partners, talking about what they've done and what they've achieved in the life of this project. So I'm looking forward to showing that very, very shortly. But before we go into the video to finish this webinar, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to our 4 panelists, to Sherry, to Phil, to Jez and to Jacqueline, for taking the time to speak with me this morning. And also, I'm aware that there are questions that are still unanswered in the Q&A box, and I'm aware that there are some that were coming up in the chat that I didn't get to. If you do still have questions that are unanswered, or if you'd like to follow up any of the conversation that you've heard started in this webinar, please do get in touch with us. If you start by emailing us at hello@bristolhousingfestival.org.uk, that's hello@bristolhousingfestival.org.uk. You can find that email address on our website. you can then follow up, and we can make sure to connect you with the right person, with the right panelist to get your question answered. So don't be shy, please do get in touch with us. But thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm going to hand over to our Jessie Carter, our administrator, who's going to play the video. But just from me and from all the panelists, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for joining us, panelists. It's been a really interesting conversation. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name's Sam and I'm a community builder here at Hope Rise, which is the Z-Pod complex in Bristol, St George's Park. It's a beautiful, spacious, peaceful place to live, and everybody that walks past is amazed and inspired about what can be done over a car park.
Being part of this Innovate UK project has been a really interesting journey, which without doubt has led to a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities for delivering greater numbers of housing using MMC or modern methods of construction. During the project, Arcadis worked really closely with Bristol Council and Innovate UK to assess the capacity for delivering more homes using modern methods. Arcadis has pioneered the Place Intelligence digital tool to speed up the delivery of housing by placing data and automation into the hands of the user. And through the Innovate UK project, the tool's been significantly developed to enable those with responsibility for delivering homes across the borough, district or region to better plan for development using modern methods of construction.
We've been developing a high-performing kit of parts for assembly close to site. We've designed, procured, tested, assembled and then reassembled our kit of parts in order to deliver net zero carbon ready homes at pace and scale globally.
So during this process we were able to achieve net zero carbon homes using renewables, and this consists of air source heat pumps, solar panels and battery storage. Any excess energy that we produce, we can feed it back into the grid, thus feeding the local community excess energy. The benefits of this also will be more comfortable homes, better insulation, better air quality. Our homes will be cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. And this will really help tackle fuel poverty and the choices of heating or eating. So thanks Innovate UK and thanks to all the team.
Legal & General Modular Homes has set a really challenging target of achieving net zero operational carbon from all of its new build homes by 2030. By operational carbon, we mean both the carbon that comes from the operation of the building, things like heating and hot water, but also carbon from the use by residents within the home, so things like running TVs and fridges. To meet the target, we have to constantly improve and evolve our design. Our part in the Innovate and Bristol Housing Festival project has seen us move from a gas boiler in our MPD1 product, which you can see down here, and replacing it with an air source heat pump. The project delivers a number of benefits, including a reduction in the carbon of the home, as well as future-proofing us against future changes in legislation. The project has been a great success, and the units are now being built, and our first upgraded units will be deployed on our Bonington site in Bristol.
This is Snug Homes. We are a pop-up production space building timber frame modules. We've created these lightweight timber frame systems that can be lifted. Any number of modules can be fitted together. So the combination of putting those blocks together can be any form. We've had our core group, we've had community champions, we've had a wider group of interested volunteers.
It's a great way to learn a bit more about construction and build your confidence up with using the kind of tools that you'll need to use
Can we have that balance of reduction in costs of materials through being able to buy in bulk, efficiency of production, training a crew up who can get the bulk of the building there, but then given the scope that people like through self-build, which is the design, and be able to go, this is the kitchen I want, this is the floor I want, this is the layout I want.
Snug in particular put a lot of emphasis on getting people that really want that experience and providing such an ample training ground.
The idea is so you can have a super low energy home that will have low fuel bills and will be comfortable for people to address the changing environment relating to climate change and the changes that are happening in terms of finances and things. So taking the idea of having an ecological home down to accessibility to everybody.
Thank you everybody for coming. That is the end of this webinar. It's been a wonderful morning, so thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Don't forget that the Bristol Housing Festival will be holding other events throughout the next week and this week and following week. Do please sign up for